Hello, good morning, and welcome to today's oral webinar. Thank you for joining us. We have 4 fabulous presentations lined up for you for today's session. I am Tom Kerr, for those of you who don't know me, Treasurer of Aura, and I will be your host this morning. The title of today's event is Research Innovation in Action. You'll be hearing 4 of the best new research ideas out there. They are qualitative research at scale with an AI virtual moderator, helping women build better financial futures with a multi-method research approach, getting closer to respondents using WhatsApp to reimagine mobile research, and Swipe Right, the practical application of Tinder technology to innovation. Before I introduce the first speakers, let me remind you that we will answer questions after each presentation. So please put your questions into the Q&A box at the bottom center of your Zoom screen. And you heard me emphasize the Q&A box. Please use the Q&A box, not the chat box. If you put it into the chat box, there is a chance that we'll miss it. So please use the chat box for chat and the Q&A box for questions. And there's going to be a poll at the end of the 4 presentations. As is our normal practice, we want to capture your rating for each presentation. We do this at every event, and this helps us to decide upon events for the future and gives us an evaluation of how well we've done in bringing you the messages that we're looking to deliver. It only takes a minute, and it helps inform, as I say, future events. So please do it. I said it yesterday, I'll say it again today. Over 70% of your colleagues complete it. So do you really want to be in the 30%? I'm sure you don't. So please complete it. It helps. Moving swiftly on, presentation 1. Delighted to be able to introduce Jenny Lindsay of Buzzback. Jenny's title is Swipe Right, the practical application of Tinder technology to innovation. So Jenny's going to share a new way of working using technology that seems to be known by the majority, that goes where consumers are going and helps clients drive internal change. This approach turns the NPD spotlight away from customers and towards the internal marketing team using Swipe. Jenny will argue that involving stakeholders delivers a more well-rounded perspective of successful ideas and unearths richer, more instinctive insights. Jenny, can I invite you to begin?
Yes, thank you very much, Tom, for that introduction. So I'm a director at Buzzback, an insights and innovation consultancy focused on human-centered understanding. And one of the areas that we help our clients with is NPD, a challenging area, as you all know, given that 3 in 4 product launches fail. But today I'm going to be talking about Swipe Right and the applications to insights. So it's not new news that Tinder is the most successful dating app. And in lockdown, we've seen there's been a huge growth in sign-ups to dating platforms as consumers have had less opportunities to meet in real life. And there's been many new players growing, such as Happen and Bumble, yet Tinder remains the leader. And what unites the success of Tinder, and as well as some of the world's largest companies such as Airbnb, PayPal, Uber, Amazon, and Spotify, is a simple and easy interface on your smartphone. This picture, which Martin actually took, he's our MD, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, but he took it of his wife and daughter at Kew Gardens. And I think it illustrates the engagement challenge really well, the difference between design, as you see people designing the layout of the paths, and the actual user experience. In reality, people go the easy way, the path of least resistance. Even somewhere like Kew, where people are paying to see the nature and greenery, they still trample the lawn. The point is that we need to meet consumers where they're going. And as an agency, for us, it's also imperative for us to be listening to you, our clients, and be clear on where you're going and what your needs are. And what we've been hearing is that you want to learn faster, you want to be able to try new methods and tools, preferably with no risk. Do more with less. We know it is less resource, smaller teams can be lower budgets, so cheaper while still bringing in depth of insight. But also finding ways of engaging audiences like Gen Z, who even before COVID, it was much harder to get them to face-to-face groups or to complete a lengthy survey online. So going back to Tinder, we thought if people are willing to judge their future partner on a swipe right or left, why not a consumer product or a pack design, messaging options, claims even? So we developed Swipe, and here's what it looks like. So consumers see one idea at a time, and they swipe right or left to indicate appeal. You can see it's very intuitive. We're really getting at consumers' gut response. And also we can measure whether they're swiping quickly or there's a bit of hesitation or swiping more slowly on certain ideas, which gives us an extra layer of implicit understanding without having to ask them something extra. And when thinking about the stimulus that we put in front of consumers, particularly on mobile and for Gen Z, we realised that this needed to be more punchy and more concise. So we opted in favour of more Amazon-style concepts that actually better reflect reality. And what it means as well, if you start out from a smaller, more concise summation of the key idea, you can then use all the consumer language that you capture through the session. So then build out the idea in more detail. And so just like Tinder, you don't make a date based on the swipe. You also go a bit deeper. You want to know, what does he or she enjoy? Do we have interests and values in common? And similarly with Swipe, we ask consumers not just the screening of the ideas, but we ask them to tell us what they like or they don't like about certain ideas. And because on the whole, they're on their mobile when they're doing this, it's an easy ask to get them to upload either a video or a photo to provide context. So they're actually doing the screening. They can be at home more often than not at this time, but they also can do it in front of the retail fixture. So they're evaluating ideas right in the place where they'd be making that purchase decision. At Buzzback, we've got a long history of helping clients to build great concepts, and we know that getting this extra richness, this extra context is really important to go beyond just what are the highest scoring ideas. So to be able to tell you, how should you be talking about the idea? How do you bring it to life? How are consumers going to use it? What will it replace? And how will you manage to change behaviour? And before launching Swipe, we did a lot of research against traditional methods to take away that sort of risk factor from clients doing something new. And I think particularly when you're thinking about taking away the 5-point scale and moving to a binary like Swipe, we wanted to give our clients that sort of confidence in the approach. So we did a lot of work before launching. And then since then, many companies have begun to shift their idea screening to this new method. And to date, we've tested more than 2,500 concepts with Swipe across many categories. And we've even had companies such as Nestle compare Swipe to Ipsos and Basis in order to validate and do proof of concept. So one of the additional benefits of this Swipe approach is that when it comes to the participant experience, what we've found is that consumers are left satisfied and they even find it enjoyable and they find it really fits with their current experience on mobile where they are. And this made us realise that if we're talking about an intuitive, easy to use survey that can take less than 5 minutes on your phone, wherever you are, that it all becomes a much easier ask of your internal stakeholders who previously would have balked at the idea of completing a 20-minute survey. So we've been able to move the spotlight from solely looking at consumers and what they think over to look at the internal team as well. And why would this be important? Well, there's a lot of evidence in management theory that one of the most important and often overlooked success factors of MPD is senior management involvement, which can bring legitimacy and momentum for new ideas and concepts. Nielsen, in their Breakthrough Innovation Report, also identified organisational togetherness as one of the key rules for innovation success. But determining this view, this common view across a team or organisation, isn't easily achieved. Firstly, with the rise of the global team, which can be composed of individuals from very different cultural contexts, it can be difficult to get this common view where you've got more low context cultures where language can be simple, clear, explicit, if you think straight talking Americans and Germans, compared to other high context cultures which are steeped in hierarchy and etiquette, where communication is more implicit, layered and nuanced. Non-verbal cues are as important as words. And secondly, institutional hierarchy can also impact a team's togetherness, as younger or junior team members might not want to speak up in front of a senior colleague, particularly if they hold a different view. But these more senior individuals can also be out of touch and wrong, especially when the world moves on and they're not as connected as they might once have been. So I thought I'd show you an example of someone who is out of touch, but in this instance prepared to be made fun of. So here's a clip of Ellen DeGeneres with Bill Gates, the world's richest man, showing how disconnected he is, but in a fun way.
All right, we're going to test your knowledge of some everyday items that you get at the supermarket. When's the last time that you have been at a supermarket?
Long time ago.
Okay. All right. This will be interesting. All right. If you can guess 3 out of the 5 products within $1 of each one, the audience will get something. Okay? If you get all of them, we'll pay off your children's student loans.
No danger there.
No. Yeah. All right, which is going to be our prize model. And here we go. There is rice-a-roni right there. The San Francisco treat, of course. How much do you think rice-a-roni would be within $1?
$5.
Okay, let's.
The audience didn't like that.
Let's see.
Ready?
Oh, it's $1. Look, what a bargain.
I'll take 5.
I know. All right.
So I guess the question is, how do we access the opinions of team members to address the issue of togetherness, the team view from top to bottom on a level playing field? And this is where Swipe can help. I'll now give you a couple of examples of how we've been using this to unlock the internal view. This first example is comparing the Swipe rankings of consumers against internal teams where they were rating some ideas on Swipe. And it reveals where the gaps are between what teams think consumers want and what they actually want. And it's interesting when certain ideas as well reveal very low levels of engagement within even the internal team. As you see here at the bottom, only 25% of the team thought that one of the ideas was any good. In the second example, we might have 2 similar ideas that have ranked equal for consumers, but when you look at the team view, one of them performs significantly better. When you think about which of those ideas to take forward, it's going to make most sense to take forward the one where the internal team have got the most motivation and enthusiasm. And in this last example, the results provide a reality check. Here we saw that consumers were more in favour of the more familiar ideas, whereas the internal team were naturally, you might say, more excited by the new and innovative ideas. So a key immediate benefit to our clients of this has been that the new insights is facilitating decision making, and it's helping to move the internal conversation on by bringing to light any hidden assumptions and helping to navigate some of the internal politics. But rather than me tell you what clients think, I'm going to share a video message from Tiffany at Ricola, who's one of our clients we've worked with, who will give you her own perspective.
So hi, my name's Tiffany Yokis, and I am the VP of Global Brand Equity and Strategic Insights at Ricola. Ricola is a relatively small family-owned company based in Laufen, Switzerland, the same small town where Emil Richterich invented our original herb drop in 1940. And though we are available around the world, people who know the brand are surprised to hear that we have only around 500 people working for us, most of us based here in Laufen, as all of our products are still developed and made here. Yet we still have the same needs as any other company to gather understanding for innovation, to guide our development work. One could argue maybe even our needs are stronger given the size of our resources. And we are continually trying to become more consumer-centric and agile. We first used Swipe to test 13 different jobs to be done for consumers across Europe. We didn't have concepts. We had done some work to try to understand these different jobs, and we had expressions of that situation, the struggle that people were feeling, and a high-level solution of what might help people achieve their desired outcome. And we used Swipe for the reason that it helped us have a very instinctive and engaging way of getting a good read on what consumers felt, that emotional instinctive response to the idea. It was really important because some of these moments were not always necessarily top of mind for people. So getting that instinctive response to these ideas was much more valuable than a maybe more rational evaluation. So we got a really good sense of which jobs were really interesting. And the funny thing is that we had done a study in another market, much more big and expensive, time-consuming study, and we actually got to some of the same territories of interest using that, using Swipe, as we did the much bigger, more time-consuming, which kind of gave us a little bit of confidence also in the fact that we were finding something very good. After that, we did a second swipe where we dove deep into one of these spaces. And the interesting thing, it was a bit farther away from our core business, and therefore feeling a bit more risky. And we had done some internal ideation and came up with around 30 rough ideas and did the swipe with consumers. But in this case, we also did the swipe internally. So it was a really fantastic way of trying to understand what consumers felt about the ideas, but also how we felt about the ideas in a broader sense, and across a broader team. So it gave us a lot more confidence in these ideas that we thought were interesting, but it also really helped us to stay focused on the problem and not fall in love with an idea that we really liked, but consumers were not quite so sure about. So making sure we didn't run off, fall in love with an idea and go for it, we were able to kind of think, okay, what is it that consumers are really looking for? And how can we really focus in on developing something that meets their needs? So we've had great experience with Swipe so far, and we will continue to use it in the future.
And yeah, thank you to Tiffany for taking the time to share that with us. Ricola was one of the first companies that we used this swipe approach with, and since then we've worked with several of the leading FMCG companies globally, and here's some further feedback that you can see on the screen. We've got clients, talked about how it's helped them to work on the blocking points internally, but also what's been quite interesting is that the fact that teams have been able to sort of get involved in the research has helped to generate a bit of excitement in the team, and they've been able to see heightened engagement across the team involved in the MPD. And also we've had people comment on just, the fact that they really do feel like it's a good way to talk to their target audience, particularly when they're talking about Gen Z. So that's enough from me. I hope that today I've given you a glimpse into how user-friendly techniques can also help to reveal what's hiding in plain sight, and that for a key consideration for better, more enlightened decision-making in MPD is togetherness, in terms of understanding the views both inside and outside an organisation. So thank you very much for listening, and I think now we've got a few minutes for questions.
We do indeed. Thank you very much, Jenny. Super lovely. I'm of that generation. I'm not so familiar with Tinder, but I'm sure the majority are. One of the major challenges, there are no questions at the moment in the Q&A box. Hopefully those will start popping in there. But a question I have is that one of the biggest challenges for the client-side researcher is, of course, influencing senior management. And it's one of the toughest skills. What would your suggestions be in terms of, it takes courage to introduce a new approach or technique to an organization. What are the winning strategies to your mind for getting that senior management team involved? Well,
I've seen this in action with one of our clients, where they they had worked with us using this in the teams, but they wanted to demonstrate a more broader point to the senior management in the organisation about how research has really moved on to challenge a myth I think that some people still had about how research was people not like standing on the street with a clipboard these days, but just wasn't necessarily that innovative. So they actually took this into one of the management conferences they had, and again they got the management team to do a swipe as part of the conference. And I think it's that the participation element can really help to bring senior management involved when they can see for themselves.
Okay, so it's really about getting them to become hands-on, to experience it for real. Okay, Wendy Mays has popped a question into the chat box because she tells me the Q&A box isn't working for her, and this is something that will affect a sizable percentage of the population. She's left-handed, and so her intuitive swipe is to the left. Has this been taken into account in some way?
That's a very good point, actually. That that we haven't. I don't think we've explored. I'll have to take that one away with me.
Yeah. Okay. I have my daughter's left-handed, and she's very vocal about the lack of forethought in terms of catering for left-handed folks. So I'm sure it's a question that many would like to have addressed. Okay, so you'll take that one away. Other questions have come in. How do you think this approach may work for an audience unfamiliar with swiping or Tinder technology?
I think that's the beauty of it. It's so intuitive. It's like if you watch a 3-year-old, playing around with a tablet computer, and they can work their way around it. It's so intuitive. I think sometimes if we have any concerns, which we generally don't, we have in some cases done a first round to get people used to it, where it's just a mock-up, not the actual ideas we're testing. But yeah, we haven't had an issue with that because it is so intuitive.
Okay. We have a question from, thank you for that. We have a question from Sarah Fryer. Hi, Sarah. Great presentation, looks great. Does it work best with certain categories, for example, FMCG, or can it work equally well for less tangible or service?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Within Buzzsprout, we use a lot of different projective techniques, whether it's using blobs digitally, imagery, and we work across a variety of sectors from technology, but also in like sort of pharmaceutical industries. And we often get asked the question about, well, can you use all of these techniques if you're talking to health professionals, let's say? But we really find, particularly with people like professionals who might have less time, that it's better to use these approaches because they're more engaging, they're more interesting, they're more fun. So we're more likely to get them to take part. So yes, the answer is that it is completely applicable across the board, not just for like new product ideas for FMCG, but we've done things where we've looked at using it for more messaging and positioning of services, that type of work.
Okay, cool. One final question I think we have time for, from Chris Carr. Has a client ever released 2 products, maybe as part of a small trial, to try and validate that the swipe research really did choose the most commercially viable product or packaging, etc.?
That is something that we are working on, that I'm really pushing hard with, working with a particular client. The trouble we've had so far is that often we're testing very early stage ideas, and actually with this approach we're able to test a lot of ideas in one go. So if I give an example, in one project we tested 100 different ideas. Consumers don't see all of those. We break them into different cells. But when you've got so many ideas, it's actually been really hard to identify the in-market success. And I think that's a really important question, which we're working on. But it's something that's in progress.
Perfect. Okay, and there's a finishing comment from Viv Harrison. Good morning, Viv. It's a comment from Viv saying, demonstrating differences between customer and internal preferences may lead to some animated conversation, I suspect, but hopefully stakeholders are open enough to accept differences may exist and they are not always right. So words of wisdom from Viv. Jenny, we're going to have to leave it at that. Thank you much. Thank you very much for a fascinating presentation this morning. It's great that you're able to join us today. Thank you for standing in. It's very good of you.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, as Jenny stops sharing her screen and the new screen comes on, I shall introduce the next presenters. We now have Richard Clark of MR Qual and Kate Waddle of Quad Consulting. The presentation title is Qualitative Research at Scale with an AI Virtual Moderator. And what we're going to be hearing about today is Deepr. It has been designed as a complement to classic qual and quant. It emulates the approach and depth of questioning and stimulus of classic qual, but uses AI and digital interactivity to achieve much of what qual groups can do at scale and at pace. The key is software, which is programmed to probe in the moment according to key insight guest themes. So we now have the first chart up on screen from MR Qual. So I'm going to hand over to Richard and Kate.
Thank you, Tom. Hello, everybody. I'm Richard Clark, founder of MR Qual. And as Tom said, I'm presenting with my associate, Kate. So this presentation is about a new qualitative research methodology which we've created at MR Qual. And we've termed this the Digital Focus Panel. Our particular digital focus panel service is called Deepr, and it delivers qualitative insight at scale. And we're going to explain what it is, how it works, and Kate will provide her perspective more from the client side. So first of all, what is Deepr? It's easiest to explain this from the participant side. For a participant, the experience is somewhere between taking part in an online forum, although without the group interaction, and an online survey. Questions and answers are posted in writing, they can be closed or open-ended, and stimulus can be shown. The research is run through a survey software tool, which we have adapted by adding an AI-driven virtual moderator. Participants are not pre-recruited and do not register in advance in the same way as other forms of qual. Rather, they're recruited from quantitative access panels amongst various other sources. This means the presence of access panels means that there is sample available all over the world pretty much instantly. The recruitment screener questions and quota controls are built into our questionnaires, enabling us to ensure that only qualified participants can complete our research. Studies can be turned around within days, even on multi-market projects. Currently, questionnaires can be up to 30 minutes in length, and sample sizes can vary from under 50 to several hundred.
So, Richard, over to me?
Yep.
So I should explain, I'm an independent planner and qual researcher, and historically I've worked a lot with MR Qual. And in this instance, over lockdown, I was given a really interesting brief by a client around really looking into lockdown behaviours, shopping behaviours, and the resurgence of the high street and more people shopping locally, which obviously was much touted in the news, but the client wanted to get behind that. I came to MR Qual, as I have more typically done, to ask at that point for an online quant survey, knowing that they could get really great results from that. But actually, Richard introduced Deepr to me, and this is the point where actually I decided to take the dive, use it, and really got great results from it. Richard will talk more about the, and I will talk more about the lockdown survey later. But what he then did is, after we'd used it, Richard asked me as an impartial intermediary to go out and talk to both agency peers as well as also client insight specialists, to see what they thought the potential was of the product. So these are a few of the verbatims that came back from the discussion. And what's worth saying is that universally these came up from whether it be insight specialists within clients or whether it be agencies or partner peers. And hopefully a lot of these will chime with you because they were very universal. The first one, which I'm sure is really hitting people at the moment, given the kind of chaos that the lockdown has brought to everybody, is this constant battle with potentially senior stakeholders as well, around wanting to jump to quants when they didn't necessarily have the qual depth to really help make informed opinions. So people saw this as a really great way of filling that gap. Equally, as quite often happens through qual, you can get a hung jury in testing, and people saw this as a really great way to actually potentially get the scale view, more quant view, but with the qual depth to actually make those deciding decisions around hung juries. Equally, there's a clear sort of time and budgets issue now, and I think that is going to be more and more the case going forward, particularly as people play catch up and potentially are able to get back into the groove with fuller research programs. Equally, lots and lots of talk at the moment around design sprints, strategy sprints, and people saw this as a really interesting way to get more than just qual groups at the end of innovation workshops to actually get a qual depth, but with a scale view in those sort of iterative, fast, agile programs that people are working on now. Obviously, again, as Richard said, you can mobilise lots of different international markets rapidly, so it could be a way to get that scale multi-market view quickly and at depth, but with much more speed. And then finally, just really people feeling quite often that they can't get the grounding qualitative insight that they need to kick off projects or briefs, and this being an opportunity to be able to get much fuller and deeper insight. Interestingly, though, as we went through the conversations, it hadn't come to my mind, but people said this could actually be perceived as being a threat to classic qual. As a qual moderator myself, I would feel, really, I would hate to think that qualitative, classic, online or face-to-face qualitative groups were going to be a thing of the past. And I think, just in case this is the elephant in the virtual room, I think to head it off at the pass in further conversations and having worked with the product a bit, this really is a complement to qual and quant research. It's not just the best of both qual and quant, but it's more because it really fills a discrete need. And I completely think of it, and when I talk more to other people, and have used it actually with a couple of other clients now, it can be that missing link in a blended insight methodology. So do think of it like that. I like to think about potentially doing super consumer groups to start getting a validated, bigger qual view using Deepr, and then you could potentially go and do a much more focused and cost-effective quant afterwards. So think of it as an extra tool in your armory, is what I would say. But now I'm going to hand over to Richard to do the kind of here's the science bits of how it works.
Thanks, Kate. So as I mentioned earlier, the software is interactive, which makes the experience more engaging and qualitative for participants. The software also has integral quality checks built into it. So these control the pace at which the questionnaire is completed, just as an interviewer would do. They also undertake real-time checking of the length and relevance of participants' verbatim responses to open-ended questions, and they show a message if an answer is too short or incomplete. These quality checks can also rephrase a question if a participant answers don't know or not sure, for example. Virtual moderation is enabled by AI. How this works is that when a participant writes a verbatim answer to an open-ended question, the software will show one or more follow-up probing questions. Different participants will be shown different probing questions according to the contents of their verbatim answer. So we'll have an example of this very shortly. This method is highly agile. Probing is undertaken immediately. Sample can be changed or flexed. Questions and stimulus can also be changed during fieldwork. Fieldwork can be in one wave or over several. And lastly, a major element of this is the availability of potential sample, especially from the quant panels. The scale of these quant panels facilitates the recruitment of participants who meet very specific or niche criteria. Now back to Kate.
So going back to this first experience I had of Deepr working on behalf of my client who wanted to look at lockdown local shopping behaviours, why did I get persuaded to try Deepr? It was basically, to start with, as you'd imagine, we're trying to get a picture of local shopping behaviours nationally. The client needed a scale view, so doing a lot of really great in-depth qual groups alone would not have given that. The client wanted 4 core regions covered, 3 life stage audiences, and on top of it, we wanted to get a really deeper and scale view of how behaviours were pre-lockdown, how they were mid-lockdown, and God forbid we ever get out of lockdown, how people anticipate they might change or not their behaviours going forward. Behind the kind of local thought here, what the client wanted to understand was a lot more complex issues, say around sustainability, food miles, local employment, provenance, buying local, buying small, etc. And that links to the idea of actually getting an unbiased, clean read, because whilst we could have done qual in some way, what we know when we talk about more sensitized topics like sustainability is you can get dominant respondents in groups. You can get people who feel they have to pay lip service or to bow to others' judgment or say what they should be, feel they should be seen to say. So we not only were able to get uninfluenced views, but because of the AI virtual moderator, we were able to get a much fuller commentary from all panelists and to drive down and understand more around the topics that actually mattered to them. Finally, the client also was looking at this. The primary purpose of this study was for Marcoms coming out the other side, and they wanted to test some of those, but in context with people in that mindset. So we were able to get a contextual read on potential future Marcoms initiatives. So to quickly talk about the experience as a client, or an intermediary in this case, of the, going through the Deepr process, what did I see were the differences? First, the Deepr briefing was, I think a lot more fundamental than maybe classic quant studies. We really got at the critical success factors and objectives, and within that, what you're really getting at is the key probe themes, topics, the buzzwords. It could be brands in some cases that need to be drilled down on if they come up in discussion with the panelists, and that is what informs ultimately the programming of the virtual moderator. So all of that was very involved, very detailed, and I was very involved in helping fine-tune the framework design. The panel recruit was then obviously able to get, because of the panel access, demographic quotas were hit. We were also able to put in attitudinal screeners to make sure we were speaking to a spread of views, particularly given the sustainability side of things. And there were very light touch articulacy and creative screeners too, to just make sure we were talking to people who were going to give and enjoy giving opinions. There is a really, because of the digital aspect, a potential to use very enriched stimulus. So I was able to, after we got through spontaneous responses, have some questions where we could use visual and verbal stimulus prompts. There's a facility for digital downloads and uploads, heat maps, timed recognition. So it's very agile and adaptive in terms of how you can work it. And really importantly, MRQual put a lot into their mini pilot survey. That includes plausibility checks. Are people actually answering correctly? And they can be prompted to definitely give it proper thought. Engagement checks. You're able, once the pilot has gone through, to tweak study questioning and stimulus, and potentially also lighten or tighten different recruitment attitudinal screeners. So when you get to the nitty-gritty of the survey, there are quality controls like dwell time, making sure people give enough time and thought to different questions. There is also natural language alternative question phrasing. So the AI enables the questionnaire to offer a different question if it seems that they've been misunderstood. And there are minimum word counts, so just to ensure you get that rich verbatim. And then finally, obviously, the absolute nitty-gritty of the difference, this is the virtual moderator. So the AI dynamic routing is really great to experience. That is both applied to how questions are absolutely tailored to the routing of how people respond, and the stimulus can equally be adjusted to as to when people see things. And it's ultimately all done in natural language, and very much meaning that you probe down on what people are really interested in, and also back to what those objectives and success criteria were from the client brief. Now back to Richard to explain some of the output.
Thanks, Kate. So here we've got an example of how the dynamic routing and moderation works. This is from the project that Kate's just been describing. So here we begin with a closed question about the types of retail outlet at which people shop. One of the possible answers here was high street independents. The client was interested in understanding the drivers behind the relatively high percentage of respondents shopping at such stores, the 30+%. So the next question here was asked only of people who'd mentioned high street independents at the previous question, asking them the reasons they shopped at these stores. Again, this was a closed multi-response question. The most frequently given answer was supporting local stores, and the client wanted to explore that to another level, so we then moved to the next question. This was an open-ended question which was shown only to people who said the reason or one of the reasons they shop at high street independents was to support local stores from the previous question. So this one asked them to explain in their own words the benefits of supporting local businesses. And here in the middle, we've got 3 example answers. Each one mentions different points. Prior to fieldwork, we had agreed a probing plan with the client around the answers or the words and phrases that we've underlined here. So, for example, one area they wanted to explore was around the vitality of the high street. So because this top participant here mentioned the high street, the next question that they would see would be a further exploration on this subject to go deeper. The bottom answer here mentions food miles. So these people would be taken down a route of seeing further questions on this subject. And the middle answer mentions traceability. So this person gets taken down a route of seeing further questions around traceability. The probing routes in terms of number of branches and the number of levels of questions is determined in advance depending on the client's priorities. So if we just take the middle answer now, which triggered the traceability probing route, we can then see the next question about this. So here we are. This is the follow-up question about the perceived benefits of traceability. And again, we have 3 answers in the middle. These are different people to the last 3 participants. And they've all been asked this because they mentioned traceability or a similar word or phrase in their previous answer. And of course, this can then go to another level. We can go even further if the client wants to do so. And we've got different routes that the probing can go, again, driven by these underlined answers.
So just really a quick snapshot because I'm aware of time, but in the debrief, Emma Quall were able to give us a really interesting, given that the Marcoms was the output, the full output of this study, we were able to get a really, really clear balance of what the motivating reasons were for shopping local. There's richness of language, not only the verbatims, but being able to really give that picture of the conversation of the nation around local shopping. And equally in stimulus, we input a sort of contact sheet, gridded contact sheet of imagery, which enabled also panelists to select images that for them connected with their thoughts around local and high street. And what we were able to do here was almost to do a most used image mood board. So again, this gave the client for their Marcoms a really nice starter for the kind of tonality they were going to use in terms of their imagery going into their Marcoms output. Back to Richard now.
Thanks, Kate. So this service is very flexible. It can be used in different ways with varying sample sizes, turnaround times, and levels of complexity in the questionnaire. We've divided this into 3 tiers. We did that before the word tier became a thing in its own right during this current period. And so tier 1, we've coined as PACE insight panels. These might be a 5+ day turnaround time for the simpler briefs. Tier 2, test and learn insight panels. This might be nearer the 10-day turnaround times. Market entry landscaping, for example, and these other different areas that you can see on the screen. And then tier 3 is the most complex. This could be 15 days or more. Adaptive insight panels. This could be of several ways, obviously multi-region, different types of audience, and also several, the stop, learn, adapt approach. So finally, we've got a client view in their own words. What they've said is you get the richness of qualitative married with the robustness of numbers. So it helps you with the decision making and all of this very fast turnaround. So we think this genuinely does fill a gap in between traditional qual and quant. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening. Very happy to take questions.
Super, thank you, Richard. Thank you, Kate. Yeah, really interesting, really smart. This may sound disingenuous, but it sounds like a very clever way to move beyond quant into interactivity through the use of AI and giving it therefore that qual dimension. Martin Silcock, who was full of questions yesterday, we only have a very short time here for questions, I'm afraid. How is the AI trained? Does this happen in the pilot? Good question, Martin.
Yes, it happens in the pilot. So, so basically, first of all, we come up with phrases, words that we think will be appropriate, that will apply, and then we put that into the AI engine, as it were. Then we'll do the soft launch or the pilot study, and we feed the output of that into a separate natural language processing tool. That helps us come back with further terminology. We then feed that into the AI engine within the survey tool as well. And then when we go into fieldwork proper, we don't just do a pilot and then go all out in terms of running fieldwork. We do the fieldwork in small batches. So we just keep reviewing the whole time. So it's an ongoing process of learning and refining the tool.
Fascinating stuff. There's another question that should pop. We will answer, we will take this one. Richard, did you ever come across any frustrations from respondents? Were they aware that they were talking to AI?
No, I mean, I think that's never come up. Most respondents, you know, were properly engaged. Some weren't. We do a lot of checking. We hand check all the answers, and anyone who we think has not engaged properly or has just given anodyne responses that suggest to us that they haven't engaged properly, we remove and we just replace them with new people. But nobody, in fact, everybody, when they've given any feedback we've asked when we first developed this, they said they're really happy with this. So no, it isn't a problem. And we really take care to not cram our questionnaires with questions that are too onerous or misleading or difficult to understand or can't be answered easily. So we, you know, the participant is on, we're on their side, basically.
Perfect.
So,
Perfect. That's really fascinated by the presentation here. And it's a really interesting topic. Richard's details are up on screen right now. So for anyone who wants to explore further, please take note of those. Take note of those details. Richard, Kate, thank you very much. That's a lovely presentation.
thank you.
Enormously thought-provoking. So we will now move on to presentation number 3, which is going to come to you from Michael Fisher, who's Customer Analytics Director of Strat 7 at Bonamy Finch. The title is Helping Women Build Better Financial Futures with a Multi-Method Research Approach. Screen is magically changing over to the Bonamy Finch screen. It's now with you. So this is an innovative multi-technique approach used for the Wisdom Council to create a viable solution for financial companies to identify, engage and encourage women to take more responsibility for their financial stability. The unique approach has combined research techniques, a community panel and advanced analytics to harness customer databases with a higher level of confidence than ever before. Michael, can I hand over to you? Hello, Michael.
Sorry, I was on mute. Apologies, everyone. Good morning. Sorry, I'm having a few technical. There we go. It is working. Thank you. Thank you very much. That was fascinating, by the way, Richard. I really enjoyed that. Absolutely. So, as Tom said, I'm Michael Fisher. I'm the Customer Analytics Director at Strat 7, and we are part of a larger group of companies that work together to enable businesses. I suppose I'm actually a little bit of I'm more of a mathematician than a research. So my aim is always about how do we use the output from the research? How can we bring it to life, and how can we apply it to customers and prospects in order to create more engagement with those customers? But what I'm going through today in the next sort of 15 minutes or so is think about the research survey and how can I accurately tag my customers with the output from the research survey? How can I bring it to life? How can I make it applicable? And how can I use it in order to create value with those customers? So generally, you know, from my experience, we start off with an amazing survey. So someone on a panel have done some research. And for the one that I'm going to be taking you through as an example, we had about 3,000 responders. We created 7 segments, and then the real emphasis that we wanted to do was how can we tag this output, these segments, onto, first of all, a customer database? How can we tag it onto a prospect database? And how can we tag it to more wider third-party data so that we can really drive increased personalization and increased relevance as a result of having those surveys? those segments. And I find it fascinating. So I'm in the area of customer analytics, and I'm always talking to clients about, how do we engage with customers? How do we do it in different voices? How do we do it in moments that matters? And we're trying to become more relevant in what we do. And the output of a survey is a fantastic window to a customer's mind. And so we know how we can engage with them. Traditionally, how do we do it? A number of ways. We do it by matching. So we take the output from the survey. We've asked them some questions in terms of their graphics, etc. And then we can append that with third-party data points. We can then recognize, once we have those third-party data points, we can start to recognize individuals, and we can start to add additional variables to give further insight. So we know more about them than what was asked within the survey itself. And once we have that rich data, we can then start to define the segments and create these models, these clusters, these segments, so that we can then start to use them to drive the comm strategy, the direct comm strategy. This all sounds really straightforward. Actually, there's quite a few constraints, and there's quite a bit of, not errors, that's too harsh a word. There's quite a few fluctuations in things. So when you think about accuracy, there's already inherent variation in the survey itself, in the responses, in the segmentation, the way you create the segmentation can have inbuilt confidence. So you can, it's not 100% accurate, and we have to accept that. The sample design itself can have inherent inaccuracies in the way that it's turned. Everyone tries to make it relevant, makes it representative of the UK. Actually, there's always going to be a small amount of fluctuation. And then when you're assigning customers in the correct segment, there is always inaccuracy there. You're better than average, you're better than random, but actually how do you get that higher? When you're thinking about the data and the data points that you're getting from third party, sometimes the data points that you want aren't all available, or they're missing, or the match rate isn't 100%. So instantly, as a mathematician, you're faced with issues and problems, and how do we overcome those to create this, to make this work as best as it possibly can. And then finally, the methodology. We all try to strive to do this. We have a very variety of models to create to apply the segments to the database, but actually there's always there's an element of overfitting that can potentially happen to the sample, that when you extrapolate it, it just becomes worse. So you've got to be very careful and very cautious in the way that you do it. Conscious of some time, so I know I'm talking fast, but I want to take you through a specific example that Tom alluded to. And we've been working with the Wisdom Council now for a number of months on a project that they have coined Yes She Can. And this is about recognizing that women in particular need to be more encouraged, that's terrible English, encouraged more to become financially astute. We know, for example, that the average pension pot of a 65-year-old woman is 1/5 that of a man's. Yeah, and women generally live longer than men. So this is a real problem that's only going to get worse. And when you look at how long it's going to take to change, based on what's been happening over the last 10 to 15 years, it's going to take a long time to change. So we started working with the Wisdom Council and with a number of strong financial companies in order to investigate this and find out what we could do about it. So we created and we ran multiple surveys on a specific sample of UK customers, predominantly women, but there were some men in there as well because we wanted to gauge that. We focused the research very much on understanding and recognizing a reaction. Yeah, so this wasn't just a collection exercise. This was about showing them something and identifying that they had an intent to do something as a result of seeing that. Once we had that information, we started to create the clustering, built the models, mapped onto the UK. Once we had that level of information and we'd used the third-party data, we were able to identify other traits that could help us within those clusters. So really quickly, there were two areas that I want to focus on. One was we asked them what their current financial mindset was, i.e. what was their current position? So were they pension only, regular saver, multiple products? And we created very simple classifications for that. As I said, during the research piece, we asked them, or we asked them in a series of questions. We showed them a video or a number of videos, and then we asked them the same questions again. And we were able to gauge the change in their responses. And that was their intent to make a change as a result of an engagement. So if you engage with somebody, what's the impact going to be? And we ranked it from a low to high. So really keeping it quite simple. But there were a number of questions around intent, planning, and will try. And then based on their their absolute change and their proportional change relative to everyone else, we were able to create this intent gauge. So once you have that and all the other questions, you can then create your clustering. And we're all familiar with this. We take the data. Now I'm demonstrating this in two-dimensional space. Obviously, it never occurs in two-dimensional space, but you can start to think about different clusters and you can start to visualize it. So cluster 1 down the bottom, you know, they responded to the videos. There was some engagement, some impact, but it was quite low. And actually their current mindset is also pretty low. Whereas the consumers in C7 were really impacted by the videos. So they were really taking interest in it. And they're also currently in a very medium high position in terms of their financial mindset. So we have that within the sample, and we have this really strong cluster where we understand in the sample what people are doing, what their intent was, how they reacted, and what they look like from a classification. What we now need to do is apply that to real women. We have to take that 3,000 sample and apply it to everybody in the UK. Within the sample, we asked them lots of questions about obviously their pension and savings, but we also asked them about their age, children, income, wealth, etc. So we could find demographics that were available within the sample that we also have within our database of the UK as a whole. So the life database, 95% of the UK, it's got about 1,500 data points. It's very clear that we had to find variables that were in the sample and that were also in the life database so that we could mirror them across. Traditional methods, as I've talked about, is about defining the segments. You then build these hierarchy of models to assign the membership based on common data points. Where are they going to be? And if you do that, you end up with this sort of spot, I call it spot chart, which is, you know, some people are accurately allocated to the correct segment, looking at their demographic profile and their behavioral profile, and some aren't. Typically, you would be looking around 50 to 60% accuracy, and this would vary quite markedly by segment. What we now need to do is think about how we can adjust the model design to make it more accurate. And we do that through a principle called instinctive. And that is about recognizing that the original survey segmentation has those inbuilt variations, fluctuations that I talked about earlier on. You know, we're asking customers, we're asking consumers to give a scale response between 1 and 10. We're asking customers their age, we're asking customers lots of things where they give a scaled answer. If you spend too long on your model calibration, there is a real danger of overfitting to the sample data. So what instinctive analytics is about how do we create a balance between the model techniques that we're going to use and the data itself, the data assessment. And actually what we need to recognize really simply is the fluidity of consumers. Consumers behave in a certain way, their responses are a certain way, but it's very fluid, it's very specific and particular at that point. So what we do by recognizing fluid data is we build the models, as I said, but we start to adjust based on model parameters. So we've built our models, we know that a customer is going to be allocated to cluster 7 because of X, Y, and Z. What we then do is adjust those responses, those answers. So in this instance, there's a range between 0 and 9. The customer's given the answer of 4. The average is 5.7. Actually, if that customer hadn't done 4, if it had given you 4.1 or 3.9, in which direction would his allocation move? And in this instance, this lady is moving from just outside C7 to well into C7 by just adjusting it. You don't do that for a single variable. You have to run it on multiple variables. You have to run it in a bi-directional way. And you have to identify the correlation between it. And it's very much an iterative process in order to create this rapid outcome so you can improve the allocated membership. The overarching principle is to get as many consumers in the right cluster, in the right segment on my customer database so that I can engage with them with relevance and personalization. So this is about slight adjustments to the responses, slight adjustments to the third-party variables to improve your segmentation and recognize inbuilt fluctuations with the responses and data that you have. I'm conscious of time, so I'm racing on. Once you've done that, you've matched it, you've created this link to the life database of the whole of the UK, you start to understand more information about the consumer, the things that you couldn't ask in the survey. You find more out about their lifestyle, you find more out about their needs, their motivations, their emotional connections, and their passions and aspirations. One of the fascinating ones I like is, you know, everyone talks about green and the economy, and but actually one of the good data points we have is that you're willing to pay more Are you willing to pay more for more organic type products than if not? And I think that's quite fascinating. Once you have that, you can then start to think about your segment profile in more detail, and you start to look at other variables in order to bring that in. So you're adding to the richness and the knowledge of the segment, so that you can then use it to drive your marketing comms, both on your customers and on your prospects alike. So just to summarize, so when you want to apply a survey segmentation to your customer base, ensure that the survey contains both demographic and descriptive variables. Make sure that you identify a third-party external data set that has really strong coverage. The worst thing ever is you're trying to apply it, you go to a third party and they've only got 20% of the UK. You need to get that as high as you can. So you need to make sure you've got high coverage, and you need to make sure that you've got a high level of discrimination and a number of really strong data points that you can use. And then finally, when you're designing the algorithms to populate and to allocate segment membership on your customer database, on your prospect database, use the proven techniques, but overlay them with this idea of instinctive analytics to increase the accuracy, to make sure that you're putting consumers into the right segment so that you can deliver strong, relevant, and personalized comms. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that.
Very much, Michael. Gosh, you're testing the old grey matter this morning. That was fascinating. Thank you for taking us through it at pace. Gosh, I was time struggling to keep up. There's a great question from Kirsty. It's one that occurred to me as well. Hi, Kirsty. Hope you're enjoying your new role. Do you need to run the segmentation from scratch? Because it strikes me that many organizations will have a segmentation. Can you use your approach and apply it to existing segmentations to improve the accuracy?
Oh, I mean, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think there's two things there. One is data is inherently accurate and inaccurate the minute you've collected it, because it ages. Consumers are fluid, so it changes. So you have to recognize that you cannot, everyone talks about data being concrete. It is concrete, but you have to recognize that it will move. So you need to do that. Existing segmentations, absolutely. And we've done that. I've done that for a number of clients where we've looked at their existing segmentation, applied it and cross-related it so that it can work and that you can have that increased level of accuracy. The thing is, it's, if you randomly do it and randomly assign, you'll get 50%, 60%. But actually, if we want to become more personalized and we want to become more relevant, when you're creating a comms, you have as good a chance of creating strong engagement or ruining that engagement by getting it wrong. So the higher that you can get it, the better. And this idea of bidirectional instinctive movements enables you to be more confident that you're putting someone in the right direction by tracking their movement if you adjust it. I mean, it's almost like scenario planning. It's saying, well, I made adjustments to X, Y, and Z. Where does my customer go to? Therefore, this is the direction they're going. This is the message I need to send out of it. As I said right at the start, my area of expertise, I suppose, is customer analytics. And I'm a mathematician, and I'm about how do we utilize this really amazing research that I see every day that companies and agencies are doing, and bring them to life and do it on a one-to-one to a individual consumer.
Gosh, smart stuff. Yeah, absolutely does. So it's all about bidirectional movements. So major events in the country can have an impact upon segmentations and the validity of them. Clearly, we're going through COVID right now. What's your view on that? Is there a need for people to reappraise segmentations right now and apply this new thinking? You're looking at a very clever technique of predicting, using the information, predicting what customers should be, despite what they've actually said.
Well, absolutely. I often talk about this idea of emotional segmentation. An answer in the morning, I went out, the dog bit me, I dropped my coffee. My answer would be completely different. So how do you recognize that? You can't, but what you can do is create a working principle that there is a variation in the answer. So that's what it's based on, is that the answer is accurate at the time, but not representative of their current feeling. COVID is a huge thing. Everyone talks about the new normal. We're going to go back. No, we'll never go back. We will never go back. This is about moving forward. What is it all about now? World events, things that change, absolutely. But COVID was a big impact. But if you go back to 2008, that was an amazing impact. Amazing. Yeah. That was a significant impact on the world and how people considered things and their idea of saving and all of those things. There are always disruptions in the market. You know, businesses can have disruptions in the market. You know, the sugar tax on soft drinks, the 5p on a cup of coffee because you've got a, you know, you're not using a recyclable cup. You know, and then you have competitive fluctuations. So, you know, Spotify went from being, you know, the biggest player in the market, the biggest fish in the sea, to all of a sudden being a small fish in a massive sea surrounded by sharks. You know, Amazon, Apple, Disney Channel wipe Spotify out in a minute because they have more resources than Spotify. So there are many, many disruptions, and they're always going on. The important thing is that you're measuring and creating a segmentation for today, but make sure that you're allowing fluctuations in the future or disruption in the future.
Gosh, wonderful. I mean, you're talking about an overlay of mind state. So you're moving into a sort of multi-dimensional correspondence state. Oh my God, that blows my mind at this time of the day. Martin Silcock has asked, we'll take one more question, I think. Martin's always full of questions. How do you keep refreshing the new data? Do you do ongoing sort of reassignments over time? And can you check the emotional changes in the data fluctuations? So I'll merge the two questions together. We're very short in time.
Yeah, okay. There's two things there again. I think tracking over time, you need to have a panel and you need to be asking the same question repeatedly, and then you can start to predict. You will get fluctuations. If you did, I did it once 3 months ago and did it now, there's a fluctuation, but you don't know whether that's a sustained fluctuation or whether it's just a blip. So create a panel, do regular checks to ensure that what the answers are. And I can't remember the other part of it. Sorry. There was something about emotional.
Yeah, it's about building in the can you check the emotional changes against the data fluctuation.
Well, you can't effectively. What you're doing is you have a sample. You're ensuring that sample is representative. But what instinctive says is that actually each of those answers could be inherently wrong. So if you adjust them all, what does it do to my overall? And no single answer, no single piece of data will drive your segmentation fully. It is a combination of 20, 30, 40, 50 variables. So making an adjustment to one of them, although it has a small impact, what you're looking for is the direction it's going. So if I make an adjustment, if you went from a 4 to a 4.5, he's going to top left. Right, okay, so let me change a few other things. Does he go further to the top left, or does he start going somewhere else? Run it iteratively times, track it, see what's happening, and then, you know, come back with your best view of what the segmentation and the modeling, because this is all about applying it to a customer database, a prospect database, for someone to send out an email or to send out a pop-up message or an in-app message. You know, this is what it's about, getting it as close as you can so that it drives relevance, personalization, and creates a response.
Michael, brilliant. I mean, you've touched on something. It's a real hot topic for me. I love all this area. I could talk about it for hours yet with you, but we have to move on. I love the principle of a fluid segmentation. Fantastic, great presentation. Thank you very much, Michael, and super responses to the questions. If anybody else has further questions for Michael, pop them into the chat box, and I'm sure Michael can respond to them there. But let's move on in the interest of time. We're now going to move on to Matt Bishop, who's Digital Research Manager, and Alex Johnson, who's Director at Jigsaw. And the title of the presentation that we're going to be hearing is Getting Closer to Respondents Using WhatsApp to Reimagine Mobile Research. So the product we're talking about here is Y-Catcher. It's Jigsaw's unique integrated WhatsApp research solution, which has been shortlisted by the MRS as one of their innovations of 2020. So Jigsaw are the first agency to have been approved by WhatsApp for automated research, enabling the collection of authentic, in-the-moment, actionable insights via the world's most popular messenger service. Matt, Alex, over to you.
Okay, well, look, thank you very much for that, and thanks to all the previous presenters. It's been fascinating listening to all of the innovations coming out, and I'm sitting here thinking I wish we'd have invented some of those as well, so thanks a lot for that. So I guess first of all, great to be here. We're going to spend the next 15 minutes talking about how we're using WhatsApp to get close to respondents, and we think reimagining mobile research. And before we get into detail, I guess the thing to do is kick off with what started us on the journey, what sort of inspired us. And that was a realization to our minds that research isn't always hanging out in the same places as consumers are hanging out. So consumers are talking to one another using social media, mobile comms apps, whether it's Twitter or Facebook Messenger or whatever, but we're not. We're talking to people using mobile research platforms, digital platforms, surveys, and so on. And that was really brought home in a survey. Oops, sorry, a bit of a technical problem here. We've gone out of slideshow. Let's just do this. This. So this was really brought home in a study that we came across, carried out by the Brazilian government in 2016, and it's all about the same time as the Zika virus. So they were trying to figure out where the mosquitoes were breeding effectively so they could eradicate them, and they decided to talk to consumers, talk to their citizens, try and figure out where these breeding grounds were. So they used email first of all, and they got 250,000 responses. They used text message, and they got 300,000 responses, and then they used WhatsApp, and they got 750,000 responses. So by talking to people where they're naturally hanging out, they got a much better response rate, a much better sort of connection with consumers. So, that made us rethink mobile research in general. And obviously mobile research is massively well established now, we're all doing it, but we thought, well, maybe there's more we can do. One of the elements that really drove that, as I mentioned, was a whole mosquito issue going on. We're not sort of, we're not where people are often. And that led us to the fact that mobile platforms are not a natural habitat for people. We're forcing people to learn something new before they can talk to us. I really love Jenny's presentation about making use of Tinder there, because it's an application that people know and works really well. The interface is fantastic. I'm told about it. I've not actually used it. But we wanted to try and replicate that. We're also driven by the fact that there's increased demands for research to be faster, smarter, more agile, accelerated in time of COVID-19. And there's always a demand for more cost-effective solutions. And part of thinking in our heads there was, if we could get something really cost-effective, would that open up the entire market so more of the smaller businesses could start doing research? Because they tend to be locked out of doing market research. So was there an opportunity there to grow the whole market? And other things as well, we wanted something that could reach the hard to reach. So get hold of some of those audiences which don't really engage with us. But at the same time, we wanted something which wasn't niche and wasn't just related to one specific topic. So it could work for loads of demographics, loads of markets, and loads of research topics. And taking all that into account, we sort of went back to our inspiration and thought, well, can we do something with WhatsApp? Can we make use of WhatsApp in what we do? And we did, which is why we're here. We're the first agency vetted and approved to integrate WhatsApp into our digital platform. So that's effectively why we're here. WhatsApp, as everyone knows, is the biggest most downloaded comms app in the world. 2 billion users, most used comms app in Latin America, Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Asia and Indonesia. India and Indonesia. So massive there. So already got a wide, big base. That's what we did. That was the innovation. So what specifically does that mean? Well, Matt's going to talk you through the detail of that in a moment. But just to reiterate, being the first company to sort of bring WhatsApp into our platform is big, because people have been using WhatsApp to do research as well in the past, but it's been a bit of a, well, if you're over 50, it's been like a Heath Robinson approach to using it. If you're under 50, it's like a scrap heap challenge approach to using it. Using WhatsApp has often required us to break phones and to hack into them. It's not been very robust. What we've done is sort of formalize it and make it much more usable. So it's all done via a dashboard, set up in minutes. The respond and complete stuff on WhatsApp, a platform that they're not a research platform, an interface they're that massively familiar with. They respond how they want, and then we receive data and analyze it in real time. So critically here, it's using WhatsApp to do all the heavy lifting, middle bit, difficult bit, while we provide the integration, aggregation, and automation. So Matt is now going to take us through a bit more about how it works, to give you a feel for that.
Thank you, Alex. So I'm just going to talk about the actual process, and it really couldn't be simpler to set up and send out tasks via WhatsApp, also being quite a simple process for participants to complete. So tasks are set up and launched through our Ycatcher platform, and then participants receive an invite to take part and complete tasks directly via WhatsApp. Their responses are then collected and analysed in real time through our Ycatcher system. And what we can also offer in that regard as well is a specific branded client analysis portal, so that you could actually go in and look at the details, and we'd also be able to give login details to stakeholders as well if they wanted to go in and have a look at the data. So let's look at each stage in a little bit more detail, starting with setup. So each task has essentially a dashboard showing top line stats, such as the number of participants who have completed each task. But also on this page, it is also possible to set incentive amounts, which we can automatically send through our system. We can also set tasks up in different languages. I think AWS and WhatsApp actually supports about sort of 50 to 60 languages. So it's great for international research, as Alex mentioned. And then moving on to the actual question setup side of things, this is a really simple process. And we can set up both qualitative and some quant-based questions too. And also we can show questions to all sample or individual segments as well. The other thing to note is that WhatsApp's perfect not just for ad hoc survey tasks, but also diaries. So we can, set questions to be sent each day if you're running an ongoing diary task. But these can also be set up to be, have different questions each day of the study. And then what we would do after that point is actually be able to bulk add participants to the WhatsApp task that we're going to be sending out. And this is a very quick process in terms of launching, but we're also able to assign them to different segments if the project requires. So now we're going to talk about how it works in terms of collection. So participants receive a task invite, and they need to accept this to take part, as you can see here. Then they get an intro text and the first question receives. In this instance, the person has decided to respond through video, so they've posted a video. Now we're going to ask a quant question. So we're asking a question about on a scale of 1 to 10. And the important thing to note here is that we're able to add validation to quant questions, so people have to answer in a certain way. People are also able to answer with text and emojis, but also it's really great for location pinning. So for example, if you have you want someone to visit a certain store, they can talk about their experience in that store and pin their location there. And now let's just briefly talk about how analysis works as well. So responses can be analysed at an overall sample or individual participant level. You'll see that the video that was posted is now here, and you can actually view that video.
How COVID has affected my travel in my local area, it ultimately depends on what the restrictions are currently.
There's enough of that, but also videos and audio that's posted via WhatsApp is automatically transcribed within our system, and you can copy and paste that. It saves a lot of time. And as you can see within this individual participant response, everything's listed out. But it's also, if you want to explore the data in greater detail, you can also export it. And here's just an example of what that looks like once responses are exported. And then go into questions and look at individual responses for those questions as well. We're also able to, as mentioned, pay set incentives through our system, and we can also set different incentive amounts for if you're looking at different groups. So you might be wanting to set different incentives for consumers and SME samples, for example. So we understand that WhatsApp has been used for research before, but the way that we are doing things has completely reimagined and improved current processes. So looking firstly at mobile research specifically and how it differs from just mobile research generally. With many platforms, respondents are asked to learn a new environment. So they might, if there's a third-party research app, for example, they'll have to learn that. Whereas with our WhatsApp tool, people are already familiar with using it. Respondents can often struggle to use video and audio on these interfaces as well, but WhatsApp is optimized for different media, including video. And often it's expensive to integrate languages into dedicated research platforms, but the WhatsApp engine is universal, so there's only a need to change the visible language, and we're able to set up new languages very, very quickly. And finally, respondents must often be connected to the internet to participate, whereas WhatsApp also works offline. So for example, if they're on a train and they lose internet connection, they're actually able to still post, and WhatsApp will store their message until they get a reliable internet connection again. Okay, and then thinking specifically about WhatsApp, old processes were typically unsupported and very reliable. People typically had to break the system to be able to actually use it for automated research, whereas WhatsApp, you know, is approved, supported, and most importantly, it's integrated with our platform, so all responses go straight into our platform. Normally, it would be one-on-one conversations in standard processes for researching via WhatsApp, but we're able to send to multiple people and get multiple answers to that as well. And as mentioned, that would be a very manual process in the past, but the way we do things is fully automated in terms of task management. So that's the point about one-to-one. And then responses weren't collected in real time, but within our system, data is actually stored instantly. So now I'm going to hand back to Alex to talk about some of the benefits of WhatsApp.
Okay, thanks, Matt. So just to wrap up very, very quickly now, we've got about a minute and a half left. As we see, there are 5 main benefits. The first one is reach. It's got high global reach. You know, we can reach most age groups, including difficult to reach people and difficult to reach opinions as well. Very flexible in terms of types of questions that we could ask, and also the formats that people can respond in. The quality of insight is fantastic. And I think this again alludes back to what Jenny was saying, in that put people in an environment that they're familiar with, and what they come back with is much stronger. You know, they don't have to struggle worrying about how to use a platform. They just communicate about the issues that they're asking them about. It's also very efficient. So from a sort of a researcher, practitioner point of view, it's much more efficient and cost effective to use, which is the last point. But also on that efficiency side of it, it's got end-to-end encryption. It's also got elastic scalability, which means it's very easy to move into new spaces with it and to add bolt-ons to it and just develop the system overall. One thing I wanted to mention was the fact of how easy it is for respondents to use as well. A lot of feedback from respondents, and this was in a specific sort of self-funded study we did, about how easy and accessible and familiar it was to use. So, you know, we did really find it unlocking people's opinions, which I think we're used to with WhatsApp. But it was a really interesting sort of juxtaposition, easy for me to say, difference between WhatsApp and other approaches, in that people sort of fed that back to us overtly when we asked them for their opinions. I'm just going to play a short, I won't play that video. So in terms of who it's for, or where we can use it, it works really well internationally. That's the other thing about using WhatsApp compared to a normal research platform, that they normally take ages to scale up, to go from market to market, language to language. We went from a standing start to doing a project in Mexico in about 24 hours. So it's really fast for doing that. In terms of audiences, it covers consumers, older and younger. We've had people in their 70s using it, and we've used it with B2B as well as consumers. And introverts, we've actually had some people feed back that they've been a lot more revealing and a lot more likely to participate using WhatsApp than if they've had a moderator, you know, one of us in real life, or participate either on social media or you know, in a focus group. So, you know, there's a whole market out there who don't really participate in research that we might be able to link into. We've used it in lots of sectors. They're listing some of the ones we've used it in at the moment, and the use cases are quite broad as well. So that was one of the things we wanted to do. We wanted to be able to use it in different types of projects, not just lots, you know, into one area. And the last chart, just to wrap up, because we're losing time here. So what impact is it having on how we're using it? Well, it hit all the challenges we had. So it's applicable for a range of users and user needs, hard to reach opinions, hard to reach people. And it does enable us to be where people are naturally hanging out and using, you know, the same way that they're speaking and communicating to one another, not just being out of home with them, you know, which we've done in mobile research for ages. And because of this, we think it's given us more authentic, media-rich insights. And linked to that as well, we strongly believe it's changing the whole conversation, or it's changing the whole medium from research platform to social media application, which has got so many benefits in terms of scalability and so on. Finally, in terms of the, you know, the nuts and bolts of it, it's very agile, it's very cost effective, and it's scalable. You know, our master plan is to turn this into an omni-channel approach at some point, and we're looking at trying to incorporate Facebook Messenger in there and Instagram as well, so that we can just fire out tasks to people, and it doesn't matter. You know, we'll know what they're using, and it gives us a massive coverage just by bolting on other comms apps. And also in terms of geography, it's very easy to go to other geographies and other languages. So look, that's a very fast run through. Thank you for listening at the end of this session, and any questions?
Matt, Alex, thank you very much for that. That's super. Gosh, you covered a lot of territory there. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask Suzanne to fire up the poll and invite all the participants to give their answers to us in terms of the rating for each of the presentations we've heard today. And that can be done by the participants whilst we tackle some questions here. So to you, Matt and Alex, Paul Weston, presumably tuning in from the people's capital of Glasgow, is asking, WhatsApp is normally used for social, sometimes not even sensible chat. How do you get users to devote thinking time to using the app rather than dipping in and out many times over the day?
We've actually found it superb for getting them to do thinking time. And I think one of the reasons for that is because their phone is with them 24/7 effectively. It's not as if we have to get them to sit in front of a laptop or get them to sort of be in one place. So people are able to ponder, to think about things, to come back to them, and that hasn't been a problem. And one of the other reasons that we've got a lot of in-depth results out of it is I think it's just the overall intimacy and the overall, you know, the closeness of WhatsApp to them. You know, they just feel there almost seems to be a sense of freedom that we saw with people when they were using it. We did a self-funded study which ran for about 12 weeks, and we had some really frank and intimate sort of video coming out on it, and also audio as well as text. So I think it doesn't break their behaviour, but it really it piggybacks on the intimacy and the lack of barriers in terms of how they use WhatsApp. Perfect.
I just love the idea of developing a construct for use of WhatsApp, basically an application of WhatsApp that is dedicated to the market research sector. That's super. Kirsty is back on again. Hi, Kirsty. Do your researchers moderate in real time?
Well, this is an interesting point about the whole thing, and it's also what I loved about the MR Qual paper is that it's all automated at the moment. So what we wanted to do is have a cost-effective approach. So questions are sent to either specific segments or to the whole panel or the whole sort of, I don't know, sample that we're using, and those questions are sent to everybody. And then one of the things to get your head around with this is you can't then probe on an individual response as we've set it up at the moment, although we're looking into that. So that means we tend to have to take almost like a longitudinal, a multi-format approach to how we probe. So if we want to get into the depths of an answer, we'll send a question out on day 1, and then day 2 we'll ask the same question from an angle. Day 3 we might specifically ask them to answer using a certain answer format, and then day 4 we might then probe the responses that we had on day 1. So it's a slightly different form of thinking that we have to use with it at the moment. But we are also looking at using AI to help us probe what comes out as well, which made the MR Qual presentation even more fascinating for me.
Okay, so we have literally run out of time, so I will come back to a couple of questions if I can ask Matt, Alex to hang on. We'll start to see participants dropping off as they go to the next meetings. But I'd like to thank everybody for taking part today. I reminder to everybody that we're having the AGM this afternoon at 4 o'clock. So if you haven't registered already, please do register for that. It will take 20 minutes and we'll give you an insight into what's happened at Aura in the last year and what is going to be happening in the year ahead. So please do join us for that site. Register for it on the Aura website. As I say, 4 o'clock this afternoon. Can I pose these two further questions to you, Matt? Chris Carr is asking, looks really interesting. Presumably there's limitations in the type of questions, survey routing, etc. that you can use. So what sort of research applications are best suited to this approach?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in terms of routing, we can actually add routing for, as Alex mentioned, certain segments or based upon certain answers. So routing can be applied in the way that we program the WhatsApp tasks. And in terms of best applications for this approach, what we typically do is, well, Alex, you'll be able to explain this too, but we often use it for pre-tasks ahead of groups and depth interviews. It's really good for, you know, getting some in the moment feedback, particularly if you're testing a new product or something like that, before you go into the depths or groups, so you have a bit of context around that. But it's also great for mobile ethnography research and diaries as well. So as Alex mentioned, we can run tasks over a set few days if we want to. So it's great for that. And the perfect thing about this is that the insights are in the moment for these diary studies. People don't have to log on to desktop and then write their diary. They can just, you know, pick up their phone and complete it straight away. And also the amount of sort of rich media content that we're getting from those studies as well is great. I mean, the outputs that we're getting is sort of very video, audio, image heavy, which is great for engaging stakeholders in projects. Alex, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I would just say that the in the moment stuff is superb with this, because you know it sort of takes out people's filters, you know, so the politeness filter seems to go, and also the filter of not saying stuff to cause offence goes as well. Because although people have, you know, people told us that because they're not actually talking to a person, they're just talking to their phone. They almost, it takes away some of that social conditioning. So we've used it to probe into some sort of sensitive issues. We did COVID and Black Lives Matter in the States, and you know, people fed back to us that they're able to be much more revealing about, you know, what they thought than if they'd have been in other forums, and even if they'd have been in front of a moderator or an interviewer, you know, not taking other people out of the mix entirely.
Okay.
But that adds to that. So I'm just aware of your time, so I could talk for another 10 minutes, but I'll cut that off.
Yeah, please do. There's one final question I would like to address. It's from Sarah, whose question is, and she suggests you may have missed it, but are you still accessing people on panels? And if not, how are you getting permissions and access? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Alex, go ahead if you want.
You go ahead, that's fine.
I was just going to say that the main ways that we would recommend recruiting for this is either through a specific qual recruiter where we would get permission at the screening stage. Also through databases, we would again get consent at the screening stage. But also we've been speaking to a couple of direct quant panels about this as well. And they're more than happy to pass over data for this purpose from our conversations with them. However, our recommendation is, you know, if we're recruiting from quant panels, people are typically used to completing more quant-based tasks, and so we actually would recommend that this works best if we you know, recruit through social media for tasks, or use qual recruiters or CRM databases where possible.
Thank you for responding to that, Alex. Super. I think it really is time to wrap up. We've gone 5 minutes over, which we tend not to do, but it's been so interesting this morning. I thought it was justified in extending it for the additional 5 minutes. So we've heard about the use of Tinder. We've heard about Deepr, applying AI. We've heard about fluid segmentation from Strat 7, very smart correspondence analysis type approach and moving people among cells. And we've heard there about an application of WhatsApp that is very specifically designed for our world of market research, and it sounds very much like a major step forward, not just simply utilising an off-the-shelf product such as WhatsApp without due consideration. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you very much indeed to all the speakers this morning, who I think have been fabulous. It has been one hell of a session, hugely enjoyable and hugely thought-provoking. So thank you again for everyone for joining us. It's time for me, Tom Kerr, to say goodbye and wish you well. Goodbye from me.